My sophomore year, I found out that my talent was speaking. I talked all the time. I decided to make people listen.
This is 20-year-old Mollie Tibbetts. On the evening of July 18th, 2018, Mollie laced up her running shoes and headed out for a jog. It was a familiar route through a quiet town surrounded by towering cornfields. Nothing bad ever happened in that town, but this time, she didn't come home.
We just really hope that we can get her found and brought back home to the people that love her.
We're trying to get the word out. We want Mollie home safe.
So far, we've been searching by air and foot both.
By the next morning, Mollie's absence had set off alarm bells. Friends and family couldn't reach her. She never showed up for work. And soon, her quiet Iowa town became the center of a nationwide search.
So listening to this, it definitely hit close home to me. This was something huge that was happening, and it could potentially happen to me.
We believe that Mollie is still alive, and if someone has abducted her, we are pleading with you to please release her.
What began as a simple summer evening run was about to turn into one of the most heartbreaking and closely followed cases in recent American history.
Who has her? Who knows where she's at? I knew there was an answer out there.
It's the Mollie Tibbetts missing persons case.
Mollie Tibbetts.
Mollie Tibbetts.
Mollie Tibbetts had just finished her freshman year at the University of Iowa. In Brooklyn, Mollie thrived as an honor student, cross-country runner, and a 3-time participant in Iowa's annual speech competition. That summer was shaping up to be one of the best. She was working at a local elementary school's day camp and loving every minute of it. She stayed late that day to close the camp, leaving around 5 p.m. Her brother picked her up and dropped her off at her boyfriend Dalton's house. Dalton was out of town, but she messaged him and then texted her mom, saying she'd stop by for dinner. Before that, she went for her usual evening run. The quiet blacktop roads around Brooklyn, Iowa were familiar to her. She had run them many times. The next morning, Mollie's cousin Morgan sent her a message, but there was no reply. The two had exchanged Snapchats daily for nearly 2 years. That silence was the first red flag. By 9 a.m. on July 19th, alarm bells were ringing. Mollie hadn't shown up for work, something completely out of character. Calls and messages went unanswered. Her phone wasn't active. Morgan noticed the Snapchat streak warning. Mollie hadn't even opened her last message.
This is very unusual because, Mollie is a young girl. She's on her phone. She's Snapchatting. She's texting her friends. She's a social butterfly.
I reached out to her cousin and I said, hey, is something going on? Like, Mollie didn't show up for work today and they hadn't heard from her. No one has seen her.
By early afternoon, concern had shifted to full-blown panic. Her cousin began frantically calling other family members, hoping someone had heard from her. But each call ended the same way. No one had seen her. No one had spoken to her.
I checked my phone and I saw I had a missed call from my dad. I had a missed call from my brother. I had a missed call from my Aunt Laura. And I just knew in that moment, this isn't good.
Deep down, everyone knew something was terribly wrong. Some relatives hurried to Dalton's house, clinging to the hope that they might find Mollie inside, perhaps lying down after feeling unwell or simply asleep. But when they arrived, the house was silent and still. Room after room revealed nothing. The panic was no longer just a feeling, it was real, pressing in on everyone. And with fear settling in, the desperate search for Mollie had truly begun. 5:56 p.m., July 19th. The Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office got the call. Mollie Tibbetts was missing. Special Agent Trent Valeda from Iowa's Division of Criminal Investigation was brought in, joining forces with Deputy Steve Kivy. Together, they would step into a mystery that would soon grip the entire community. She'd been gone over 24 hours, but officially missing for maybe 12, hours they couldn't afford to lose.
We didn't know if she had a medical issue, or if she'd been hit by a car, or if she'd been abducted. We had no idea.
They started the investigation the usual way, reconstructing her last known movements. Mollie hadn't shown up for work on the 19th, so the focus shifted back to the previous evening. The last clear point was around 7 p.m., July 18th, when she texted her mom, mentioning a jog and possibly coming over for dinner. That became the starting line. Investigators began piecing together a timeline, minute by minute.
She left the house and didn't come back.
She would have left home, run through town, and then gone on a blacktop east of Brooklyn, which was one of her normal running routes.
But now, nearly a full day had passed and no one had heard from her.
Dalton was out of town working, so Mollie had to stay there to let the dogs out. She was essentially dog sitting.
Mollie had been staying at her boyfriend Dalton Jack's house in Brooklyn, Iowa, while he was away for work. The home belonged to Dalton's brother and his wife, and they were the next people investigators turned to. Inside, nothing suggested a break-in. There were no splintered door frames, no shattered windows, no signs of a struggle. Mollie's wallet and clothes were still neatly in place, as if she had only stepped out for a moment. It was as though she had simply vanished, leaving behind a life that still looked ready for her to walk back into. Then came their first concrete lead. Around 8 p.m., July 18th, a local woman named Christina Stewart was driving east of town toward her family's farm. She spotted a young woman jogging along the blacktop road. As a hairdresser, she recognized Mollie instantly because she cut Mollie's hair. It was their first solid lead, proof that Mollie had gone jogging that evening. But what happened after that? That road was hemmed in by walls of tall grass and towering corn, 8 to 10 feet high on both sides. If Mollie had been attacked or injured, finding her would be almost impossible. 2 days after Mollie Tibbetts vanished, the small town of Brooklyn, Iowa came together like never before. Fearing the worst, a rare but chilling abduction, investigators called in the FBI. Drones took to the skies, sweeping the endless cornfields that surrounded the town. Volunteers showed up on foot, four-wheelers, and even boats, combing every inch of land and water.
I'm feeling kind of scared and nervous, and I'm anxious, hoping we can find her today.
So far, we've been searching by air and foot both.
Mollie's family and friends joined the search, holding tightly to hope that she would be found alive. But as the hours passed, more difficult questions emerged. Had Mollie been keeping something hidden? Investigators searched her social media and reached out to friends, hoping for a clue. Her phone was still missing, but they managed to clone. They combed through every text, every conversation from that final day, but there was nothing. No arguments, no warning signs. Attention then turned to someone who might have had insight into Mollie's life, her boyfriend, Dalton Jack. Dalton had known Mollie since 6th grade, and they'd dated for 3 years.
She was telling all of her family members she was going to marry Dalton. She knew he was about to propose.
I think Dalton treated her really well, and she felt very loved by him.
He appeared calm, but genuinely concerned. Investigators had to check his alibi.
Was Dalton Jack a suspect? Yes, he was. There was some allegations that Dalton had a brief relationship with another young woman, but ultimately, Mollie had forgiven Dalton for whatever had been going on.
At the time of Mollie's disappearance, Dalton had been 2 hours away, staying at a hotel with coworkers. Surveillance even showed him shopping at Walmart while Mollie was out jogging. Just like that, another lead went cold, and Dalton was ruled out. By July 23rd, Supervisor Molly Ammon focused on Mollie's Fitbit, which she was believed to have worn during her run. Unfortunately, while they recovered data from previous runs, there was no record from the night she vanished. Outside Brooklyn, a new person of interest emerged, Wayne Cheney, a local pig farmer with a troubling history, multiple restraining orders, harassment, and stalking charges. When asked to take a polygraph, he agreed, but walked out midway through in anger. Suspicious, but not enough to charge him. Ultimately, he was dropped as a suspect after no connection to Mollie could be found. Meanwhile, the FBI shifted focus from the Fitbit to Mollie's phone. Using specialized tech from the Cellular Analysis Survey Team, or CAST, they mapped her movements based on tower pings. That's when the breakthrough came. On July 18th, between 8:15 and 8:28 p.m., Mollie's phone had been moving east at the pace of a jog, about a 10-minute mile. Then, it stopped. 4 minutes later, the phone was on the move again, but now traveling south at 60 miles per hour. The chilling realization set in. Mollie hadn't simply vanished on foot, she had been taken away by vehicle. Her phone's last signal pinged at 8:53 p.m., 15 miles south of Brooklyn, and then went silent. Though they didn't have the phone, its last signal pinpointed where it was likely turned off or destroyed, shifting the search to that area. Meanwhile, Mollie's parents refused to give up. They raised a substantial reward, pleading for any information that could lead to her.
As of 10 o'clock this morning, we have raised $172,000 that will be paid to you as soon as Mollie is safely home.
But unfortunately, despite the growing attention and generous reward, no credible tips came in. With physical evidence scarce, investigators revisited security footage from garage-mounted cameras on Brooklyn's east side. Two pointed toward the Blacktop Road, the direction of Mollie's run. After hours of scanning grainy video, an agent finally spotted something. A blur at 7:48 p.m. that looked like a runner. They zoomed in, slowed it down, and there she was.
So she'll jog through right here on Boundary Street between the bush and this house. It only lasts about a second and a half. And if you expand the video, you can actually see the ponytail bouncing as she jogs.
It was a breakthrough. They could now pinpoint her exact location just before she vanished. And moments after Mollie was seen jogging on the security footage, an unknown car followed.
Now, the timing of cars coming and going starts to matter, because immediately the first thing after you see when she goes by is this black Chevy Malibu.
It wasn't an ordinary car. Even in the grainy video, investigators noticed custom chrome and aftermarket side mirrors that made it stand out. Then, at 7:56 p.m., a white minivan passed by. It matched the timeline of witness Christina Stewart, who'd later report seeing Mollie running. Her sighting was now confirmed. The Malibu appeared again 2 more times, as if it was circling its prey. Investigators couldn't make out the license plate or the driver's face, just a fuzzy silhouette. But now they had their most promising lead, a suspicious vehicle trailing Mollie repeatedly. The entire investigation suddenly shifted focus. If they could find that car and the person behind the wheel, they were convinced they'd be one step closer to finding Mollie. The next day, Deputy Steve Kivy was driving home when he spotted something on the Highway 63 off-ramp.
I notice at the off-ramp here, a black Malibu with the silver mirrors and the characteristics we were looking for.
Kivy called in the plates and followed from a distance. The driver eventually stopped, but he didn't speak English, so a neighbor came over to help translate. The man identified himself as Christian Bahena Rivera, a farm worker at a local dairy. Investigators confirmed the black Chevy Malibu Deputy Kivy followed matched the car seen circling Mollie on video. Investigators soon learned that Christian Bahena Rivera was an undocumented immigrant who had been living in Iowa for 7 years under a false identity. Coworkers described him as quiet, hardworking, and reliable. Nothing about him raised alarms. But just 4 days after Deputy Kivy had spotted the black Malibu, Rivera was brought in for questioning. He consented to a full search of both his cars and even agreed to have them towed to the sheriff's office. Investigators wanted someone fluent in Spanish to lead the interview. They turned to Officer Pamela Romero, a patrol officer from Iowa City who, unfortunately, had no experience with homicide investigations. Romero kept things conversational. Rivera opened up easily, talking about his daughter, his ex-wife, and repeating what he'd already said. He'd heard about the missing girl, but didn't know anything more. Then Romero shifted gears. She asked about his car, the black Malibu caught on security footage following Mollie Tibbetts the night she vanished, and showed images from the video.
So we made the decision, well, what we'll do then is we'll show him a picture of his car right by Mollie. Basically the still photo of her jogging in his car, then a minute later driving behind her.
Rivera claimed he was visiting a relative that evening. But as the questions got more pointed, his story began to crack. He finally admitted he had seen Mollie that night and that he found her attractive. That was the moment everything changed. Officer Romero now believed he was the guy. Now came the hard part, getting him to confess.
She comes out at one point and says, "This is definitely your killer, but I'm stuck here, guys. I'm gonna need some help."
Police were convinced that Christian Bahena Rivera knew what had happened to Mollie Tibbetts, but he wasn't talking. The pressure was mounting, and the interview dragged on with moments of silence and resistance.
I think you're scared because you know what happened a little bit, but you're afraid to tell us. And that's okay. And it's okay to tell us.
Bahena Rivera claimed he suffered from a condition that caused him to black out, insisting he had no memory of what happened to Mollie. Eventually, Rivera gave in. He admitted he'd followed Mollie.
So he said he saw her. Mollie smiles at him, and then he decides to park his car like 100 feet behind her. She was listening to music, so she was not aware that he was behind her.
He claimed they had some kind of confrontation, a struggle, and then she was bleeding. That was when he finally said the words they'd been desperate to hear. He knew where she was. Rivera led investigators to a nearby cornfield, just a mile from the area they'd been combing for weeks. The corn stood nearly 10 feet high. With only flashlights, officers swept slowly through the thick rows. It was just after 4:30 a.m. when they arrived at the remote field. Beneath a pile of corn stalks, they saw them first, her running shoes. Bright, colorful, impossible to miss. Around them, her clothes lay scattered, and at the center of it all, the badly decomposed body of Mollie Tibbetts. Mollie Tibbetts had been stabbed to death. News of her murder shattered her small town.
Authorities have arrested a man for the murder of missing University of Iowa student Mollie Tibbetts.
24-year-old Christian Rivera faces a first-degree murder charge.
For her family, the heartbreak was unbearable.
I fell to the floor and I was just sobbing. You know, because I knew in that moment I was never going to get to hug her again and I wasn't going to get to welcome her back.
3 years after Mollie Tibbetts vanished, Christian Bahena Rivera was tried for her murder. Though Rivera had confessed during interrogation, by the time of the trial, he'd recanted, pleading not guilty. Nearly 3 years after Mollie's murder, Bahena Rivera suddenly changed his story. He claimed 2 masked men with weapons forced him to drive around until they spotted Mollie jogging. One got out, confronted her, and later made him drive to the cornfield, supposedly placing something in his trunk.
He was unbelievable. Here you come up with this completely different story, nearly 3 years later.
It's one of the biggest fish stories I've ever seen a defendant put on in a criminal trial.
Prosecutors presented a strong case. The security footage of Rivera's car circling Mollie, blood matching her DNA found in his trunk, and his confession to Officer Romero.
Ladies and gentlemen, when you examine this evidence together, there can be no other conclusion than that the defendant killed Mollie Tibbetts.
But there was a near-fatal misstep. Romero had accidentally omitted part of the Miranda warning, the clause about anything said being used in court. Because of that, the judge threw out 6 hours of her interview, including the confession. It was a crushing moment, until investigators revealed a second, properly Mirandized confession made after Rivera led them to Mollie's body. That moment salvaged the case. The jury didn't deliberate long.
I would ask that the court attendant read the jury's verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Christian Bahena Rivera, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
Mr. Bahena Rivera, you and you alone forever changed the lives of those who love Mollie Tibbetts. And for that, you and you alone will receive the following sentence.
Rivera was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Though justice was served, it was little solace to Mollie's loved ones. In the years since, Mollie's memory has become a living part of Brooklyn. Teal ribbons, her favorite color, line the streets of Brooklyn each July. A memorial fund set up in her name has raised over $165,000, helping to support child and adolescent psychiatry, turning grief into hope for others. Though her parents remain heartbroken, mourning the daughter they lost far too soon, they hold on to the hope that Mollie's story will be remembered not for the tragedy, but for the radiant life she lived, a legacy that continues to inspire.